After show.
Hey, I had something that I wanted to show you. I wanted to get to it in the first part of the show, but I didn't want to run out of time because I thought of it towards the end. But I thought this was pretty interesting, a pretty interesting article. And I'm gonna actually, I just had to pull it up. Let me share my screen here. This one I don't need sound for, but this is an interesting, wrong again, 50 years of failed eco-apocalyptic predictions. And maybe you'll remember some of these, but some of them I didn't know about, but it's kind of interesting. All of the times, if you go back, like from the time you and I were little kids, there's so many times that they predicted the doomsday scenario.
Oh, yeah.
And we have to remember that, especially in the face of everything that's going on today. But the Dire Famine by 1975.
I don't remember that one. You know, this was back during the energy crisis and all of that. So
this actually came out in 1967. So they were saying in 75 there was going to be a dire famine. This is a Stanford biologist that's saying that the time of famines is upon us and will be at its worst and most disastrous by 1975. Book it. It's going to happen. In 1965, it says everyone will disappear in a cloud of blue stream by 1989.
What?
Yeah, this was August 10th, 1969. Yeah, this is the trouble with almost all environmental problems, as this scientist is that by the time we have enough evidence to convince people, they're dead.
Oh, this sounds like AOC now. You know?
We must, they all sound like AOC. We must realize that unless we're extremely lucky, everyone will disappear in a cloud of blue stream in 20 years. Here's another one. April 6th, 1970, scientists predict a new ice age by the 21st century.
Hey, now stop there a minute, because I recall, and I think I said on this podcast before, that I remember in those winters of, I think it was 76 and 77, or was it 77, 78? Okay.
Yep. I'll never, I had a paper out during those years. I'll never forget how
I think I did during that time too. Yeah, it was brutal. But what I remember about it is never going to school and building igloo forts and all of that all the time.
Oh my God.
Did you have your snowmobile suit? And we were impervious to the cold. We had snowmobile suits with snowmobile boots and gloves. I mean, it could have been 500 below. We would have been fine.
Oh, and I just remember, I mean, we in the neighborhood that we lived in, we had these ditches at the end of our yards. And when the snowplow would come by, it was because it snowed so much and we lived in the snow belt. They would pile up the snow into those ditches. So there would be like 10 feet of snow there. And we made all these tunnels through there.
Yeah.
And oh boy, did we ever have fun with that until some 60 Minutes thing came out that said that kids were dying in those tunnels when they collapsed. And then we weren't allowed to play in the tunnels anymber.
Yeah, they didn't. I think our parents secretly wished that would happen. But I remember that during that time, I remember very clearly. Remember that show, The Morning Exchange?
Oh, I loved that show.
Yeah, they had a guest on, a scientist complete with charts and everything, talking about how we were going into, at that time, we were entering in a new ice age.
I remember a lot of talk about that.
Yeah.
This one actually was written in 1970, and it's saying that by the 21st century. So he was a little off, because I mean, this happened at the end of the 70s. This terrible snow that we've never seen anything like that since then either.
Right.
Been really crazy, but they were saying, we're in an ice age and everything. So here's one: America is subject to water rationing by 1974 and food rationing by 1980. And these are scientists that are coming out with this stuff. U.S. scientists sees new ice age coming, a lot of ice age stuff. Here's one, another new ice age by 2070. It just goes to the point that there's a very popular thing to say that the world is coming to an end, and you get a lot of scientists that come away with this. Here's one: the ozone. Remember the ozone scare? The ozone is.
I still think that's a problem.
Yeah. Well, this is actually saying that we're all going to die as a result of that. Right. And it should have happened a long time ago. This is, cooling and then cooking and then, acid rain kills everybody.
What is acid rain? Is it just simple pollution coming down in the clouds in the form of rain? I remember that was a thing years and years ago.
Sure,
but I haven't ever heard of it. Yeah.
This was 1980. Yeah, in 80 through 84, we both graduated in 84. That was all the talk. This acid rain. I never saw any acid rain, but I heard a lot about it.
I'm just saying I haven't heard about it since.
Away. Yeah, it just went away. It totally disappeared. These are the things we forget about, right?
Right.
But this has been going on, and then they bring out all these scientists to additionally, because scientists said it.
I remember I summarized that one very optimistic Jordan Peterson podcast. He had a guest on that was talking about all the great things that we never talk about. Another thing back then we used to all talk about is all the rainforest being devastated. And so we won't be able to replenish the oxygen because we're just devastating the rainforest.
That was huge. Yes.
And, but since then we've gotten into that whole, when you tear down forests for their uses, you replenish. And we've been, I forget the percentages, but he had statistics about how we've replenished all these land. China's done a miraculous job in that regard. But around the world we have, so that's not a problem whatsoever anymore. And it's never talked about anymore, but the solution has never been talked about either. And the other thing that was talked about a lot, and back then all the way through the 90s and probably even up to today, is overpopulation. And now studies show that we are going to likely, after the baby boomer generation dies off, that's going to be tough because it's a lot of people that will be dependent. But that the trend is going to be, we may not even have a population that replaces itself in a couple decades. So we will hit a decline. Something like that. The new scientific models see that we're going to hit something like 10.5 billion, and then we'll start to retract.
Well, I think it's interesting here where all these other articles are talking about how we're in this ice age and we're all going to freeze to death. But then the lever gets flipped in 1988. No, we're going to burn to death. Everyone's going to have these long, hot summers, and it's global warming. No, it's global cooling. The point is that these things have been going on for a long time. And, the thing about science is that, and I think the cool thing about science, the thing we have to remember is that science is in the business of constantly trying to disprove their own theories. And when we get away from that, we actually get away from the science. Science is never
get into politics.
Yeah, it becomes dogma or even propaganda. And we have to be careful of that. We have to look back and say, look, science has done a lot of good, but it's never been 100% right. We learn when we learn from our mistakes. At least we should hope that we're learning from our mistakes, and we should always take these things with a grain of salt. You see one study, look at the other studies. What do they say? We should be open to that kind of thing. But it's interesting how we see that science and business go together really well, because, some scientist says something and then here comes a business to support. Well, now you're going to need underground bunkers. And then it turns out that the scientists and the bunker company are in cahoots.
Well, that's for sure. And that one podcast I was talking about, I think it was last week, but it was supporting why there's so much, I don't want to go down this road too much, but the hesitancy, I'll just say that. In the pharmaceutical industry, one of the things they did, and I didn't say this on the podcast last week, but one of the things the FDA or the CDC, somehow, some way, they allowed scientists like Fauci to start being able to profit from their studies, up to the tune of like $150,000 in a study
per study.
Right.
So that's the thing, is they got a whole bunch of them going on at the same time. So not only does Fauci get royalties from these pharmaceuticals, but so does his staff. And they're constantly taking on jobs that the pharmaceutical companies have, doing their testing for them. In other words, they're basically on the payroll of the pharmaceutical companies.
It bastardizes everything.
And then they're the same people that are responsible for approving these drugs. So these are supposed to be our centurions, our guard against health crisis, but it turns out that it's the fox guarding the hen house.
Do you remember how we used to trust them, 10, 20 years ago? We used to trust them empirically,
Oh, yeah. Like, remember that commercial? I'm not a doctor, but I play one on TV.
Yeah.
And we even trusted the doctors that played doctors on TV.
Right.
I remember true. He took his glasses off, like,
It's sad. It's sad what's happened.
It is.
It is like since the 80s. Yeah.
I remember, really an eye-opening conversation on a plane down in the 90s where I was talking to a physician that I was sitting next to, and he was telling me how medicine had changed so much, and that he was basically now an administrator and not a doctor any longer. And that was back in the 90s. Now it's gotten even worse than that.
Oh, yeah.
I was talking to a company recently, and they have a platform that can handle using AI that can handle pre-authorizations. And as I looked into this company and what they do, they had these studies that were talking about how doctors spend sometimes half of their day chasing around pre-authorizations. When I say pre-authorizations, it's they've got a procedure that they need to do for a patient, but they need a pre-auth from the insurance company. So now they got to go to the insurance company and wait on the phone and talk to a whole bunch of different people and send faxes and things like that. Where this has become their job, is that they're chasing down, they're doing all this stuff with Medicare, Medicaid, and the insurance companies, and they're not actually getting in front of their patients and doing the thing that they went to school to do, which they love. It's amazing what's happened to the healthcare industry in so many different ways.
I didn't realize it until I broke my ankle there. 3 places. It was bad, and I needed surgery on it, right away, emergency surgery. This was about 15 years ago, and maybe more than that, maybe like 18 years ago. And so I had health insurance, and being self-employed my whole life, it's always been like, I started out paying something like $85 a month for health insurance. And by this time I was paying like $200 a month for health insurance. But I never used it because I never went to the doctor. Right. And then this thing happens about 18 years ago. And I get out of the hospital and I'm starting to get all of these bills. The mail from it was insane.
Isn't it?
And because prior to that, my experience was, I don't know, you got a note from your insurance company on how it was handled or something. And that was it. It was like, you didn't think about it. Now I'm getting all this mail and they're telling me, my insurance company, which is obviously just a team of lawyers, they're telling me that I got to send this stuff back to the hospital, and because they're arbitrating the actual bills.
Right.
It was like, I couldn't believe what was going on here. That was my eye-opening experience to, wow, healthcare is different all of a sudden.
It's a nightmare. I had a hospital experience a few years back where I thought, man, I better get my heart checked out. I feel like I'm having these weird pains. And I went to the hospital and they put me through all these tests. I spent a whole day at the hospital. Turned out I was fine. But unbelievable what happened after that with all the bills that came. I mean, you would have thought that I'd seen every individual doctor within that hospital, because I was getting bills from all over the place, not just the hospital. Some guy saw me walk down the hall. He wanted to bill me for that. It was, and I couldn't, and I had this huge stack of bills. It was a lot of money. I couldn't make sense of why isn't the insurance company picking this up? And this bill looks a lot like this other bill right here. Aren't these the same thing, but there's different amounts? I don't know how anybody can go through a situation with that without feeling like they're going mad, because what they do is they confuse the heck out of you. The insurance company confuses you. The hospital confuses you. Nobody seems to know what the heck they're talking about. And these are minor things. I mean, I was fine. Imagine if I wasn't.
I don't know if this can happen, but the problem with everything is that everything has become big business. And then they start stealing from you because they're in cahoots with the politicians. Right. So they get their way. That's exactly what happened to the medical industry. No longer do we have Dr. Smith down the road. That's my primary care physician in his own private office with his private staff, who knows my family, who's been our doctor since we were kids type stuff. That doesn't happen anymore. All of those people since Obamacare had to join the bigger hospitals and join the big business. And like Uber, what Uber did to the taxi industry, like Airbnb did the hotel industry, it privatized everything. Is there a way that we can get back more of this, like independent podcasts have been doing, dismantling mainstream media, big, bad mainstream media? Is there a way to get back our health industry?
I have thought about this exact same thing so many times, Barry, because you're exactly right. The medical profession has been commandeered by the government.
There you go. Good word.
And it really happened in a big way with Obamacare. I was so vehemently against this because of exactly what's going on right now. They were salivating over this whole thing, and they talked too much about how good it was going to be for us. I felt like I was at a carnival, like, oh, this game is easy, and it just, I knew what was coming here, and now look at what's happened. But medical professionals cannot actually use their critical thinking to solve a problem anymore. They've got to use the preordained protocols that are coming down from people like Dr. Fauci. And it's really, and if they don't follow those protocols, they can be sued for malpractice. Right. And they've really got their hands tied when it comes to actually practicing medicine these days. And I think there's a lot of different rules and regulations that are probably tens of thousands of pages long that would be obstacles against doing something like what you just
I think you're right,
postulated. But I think that's really what needs to happen in order to have some sort of salvation for our healthcare industry.
There's a movement happening. Everybody, when they comment every day, 80%ers, back to that Pareto principle, when they start waking up to all of this crap that we have been fed, and even get off CNN and off these mandates, and want to straighten out our educational system, finally, after decades of being indoctrinating people, we're finally coming wise to it. Now, is that too late? It always seems like it's too late. That pendulum thing again.
Yeah, it does. That's funny. It always feels like, it seems like it's too late, but how do we know for sure?
It has to get that bad though.
We gotta go. You're right. Right. It's almost like You
know why? Here's why. Because they always use the conspiracy theory thing, and it works so well for so long.
I wish that it didn't.
In conjunction with the racist thing, which worked so well for so long. And people are finally, even in spite of all of that, finally like, you know what? This isn't making sense.
Right.
None of this is making sense. It just, but boy, there's some crafty manipulation that people have devised.
There really is. And it's unfortunate. And you're always going to have that. You're always going to have it. And you're always going to have it in a free society too. And so, that's the other thing that we've got to be, when we as a government try to eliminate that, like, oh, let's get rid of all of the shady characters out there by eliminating any way for them to speak. For instance, this whole misinformation campaign that these politicians, oh, that's misinformation and that's misinformation. We got to crack down on the misinformation. Oh, what does that mean, really? It's censorship. It sounds good. We should get rid of misinformation. Nobody wants misinformation, but the problem is that when you really empower the government to get rid of misinformation, you always run into censorship. So you need to go back to the truth has a ring to it. And people, the way that people are created in their heart of hearts, when the truth is being told, there's a ring to it that they get. And now a lot of times we want to lie to ourselves and believe the lie, and we do that in our brains, but our hearts normally don't lie on that whole thing. And so the whole thing about free speech is that, hey, the truth isn't afraid to stand up to a lie. And if somebody can tell a lie, like for instance, and I've said this on the show before, if the KKK wanted to have a demonstration down the street, I don't like the KKK. I don't like what they say, but I'm going to allow them to speak so that I'm allowed to come in and speak the truth the way that I see it, and let those two truths fight it out. And the people will be able to make a decision and judgment based on the ring that they hear in their heart. And what we see is there's so many forces that are coming at people these days that say, no, we can't trust the people to make that decision for themselves because they can never do that. We need to come in and help. Those are the wolves in sheep's clothing, as far as I can see.
For sure. But I think it's even easier than that, that journalists, back to the positive again, CNN is destroyed. And they did it to themselves because the lack of journalistic integrity. And getting back to like independence, like Crystal and Sagar, and I heard Crystal talk about this the other day, is journalism used to be like you had to corroborate your big breakthrough story, your information with two separate credible sources. That was just the way the gig was played. Journalism also used to be kind of a rebellious movement. It was seen that way. You didn't make a lot of money, but you were standing up against the man and fighting the good fight. What it turned into through a few different movies that celebrated journalists and stuff. Throughout the 80s, journalists turned into rock stars, kind of celebrities. Now they want to be seen hanging with the celebrities, which they are. And now they want to make sure that they stay on the invite list to the political events and different things like this. So it got completely bastardized to the point where they're eating their own. Hello, CNN. And back to the positive. I think that that places like Crystal and Sagar who are privately owned and being bankrolled by independents, by everyday subscribers, not by Pfizer or whoever else. This is the road to salvation. And dude, that's saying a big positive thing right there.
Yeah.
So you're talking about misinformation, and that's how that's going to be cured, is going back to the way it used to be done, and you're going to be rewarded for it.
Yeah, it seems very logical, and I totally I want to see that so badly, and I'm so glad that we are seeing that. We're seeing these people come out, and they're doing well. We talk about Joe Rogan all the time. It's the same principle here. And I'm glad to see that's happening. It's amazing the audience that's being attracted to these kinds of people out there.
And people are awakening quickly, very quickly. So there's a lot of positive there.
Well, happening out there right now, as we take a look at this pendulum turning, Joe Biden reaches blowout territory in new polls. This is really interesting. You talked about independence. The latest here is the approval rating is 34% for Joe.
Oh, you just froze up again.
Biden, 56 disapprove overall, but amongst independents. Oh, am I back?
You're back though.
All right. Well, at least it happened in the after show.
Happened once in the upfront show.
Only once. That's good. Yeah. Well, we'll keep working on that. Yeah. Independence approval down to 23%, 66% disapprove. And amongst Hispanics, approved 44%, disapprove 45%. That is a dramatic drop for Joe Biden amongst Hispanics and independents. Those are the ones that keep him in office. The state polling is in here as well, which is pretty crazy. But if you take a look at the midterm elections, then that's really the presidential approval coming into the midterm elections is a pretty huge indicator of what's going to happen in the midterm elections. You've got Arizona, Georgia, Nevada, New Hampshire, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin are big Senate races that are going on. Joe Biden's way underwater in every one of those states right now. So you're going to see, I think, in the next few months, some interesting movements by the Democratic Party. And we're just going to have to see what happens there. In the meantime, what you have now is that 30 House Democrats have now retired or said they're not going to run for re-election in this November. And the most recent one was Kathleen Rice. She's in her fourth term right now, but this is something they haven't seen for a long time. Let's see, 30 is the highest in 3 decades for a party, which is interesting. This all goes back to the polling numbers, and it says that the majority say that with polling numbers where they are and the fear of losing the majority, people are heading for the hills. So the Democrats have a big uphill battle here to deal with. To your point, people are seeing it. And I think the biggest place that people are seeing it is in the economy. And when they go to the store, they cannot believe the prices that they're having to pay for their groceries these days. It's outrageous.
I think equally is the crime, safety.
I think you're right about that. Polling numbers are showing that that it's the economy number one and crime is number two, actually. So you're exactly right. They are seeing that.
Yeah, well, it's a shame that it takes us going so down far the role of non-common sense before we wake up. I mean, come on. Some of these movements over the last few years have been just downright jaw-droppingly dumb, like defunding the police.
Yeah, like how does I remember they try. We're not really talking about defunding the police. That's a conspiracy theory. But wait, you said that. It's so funny how they can throw that conspiracy.
That is funny. That is funny. I will still say I think that we need better training for our police, and police, like, you got to realize that. Yeah, you're training a 22-year-old young guy for the most part who wants to be a cop because of those TV shows and movies that he's watched. You got to train them to, first of all, know that you're going to feel a lot of power, and with that, it will bring out the worst in you, and that will put you against the society that you're here to serve and protect. Remember that you're here to serve and protect. I mean, there needs to be that kind of training, but also a hell of a lot more self-defense and regular training. I mean, I heard back then when it was an issue that you got trained X amount for the first upfront, indoctrination period, and then that was it. No more training. I mean, you should be getting regular training.
I would think that, that seems to make all the sense in the world that it would be a regular thing.
Mental and physical, meaning I think self-defense, but also the mental about getting back to the protect and serve. Not that you are some officious kind of almighty out there.
It's got to be tough being a police officer or recruiting police officers into that line
especially
of work
now.
Today. Yeah. I was at a job fair a few months ago, and there was the local police department was represented there, and I wanted to go talk to those guys. I Not that I wanted to be a police officer, but I gotta say, there's always been a little part of me that thought, hey, that seems interesting. I could probably do something like that. And I went over there and I talked to these guys and I'm like, so what's it like? I mean, how's it going? And they were like, real straightforward. It sucks being a police officer. They weren't pulling any punches over there. They were just talking about how dangerous it is and how nobody likes them at all.
Yeah, right.
I was convinced that I needed to not have that as a job.
Yeah.
But I mean, it would be a tough gig, and hats off to these guys for the good ones that are out there doing it.
There's a lot of good ones.
Definitely run into police officers that had that ego complex going on.
Lots.
And it's ugly when you run into that.
Yeah, it's kind of a contagion too. It's like any company. You get a bad apple and they can really infect your team, Yeah. But I will say that I've had this friend, I haven't seen him in a few years now, retired police officer, Shaker Heights. Just the highest character guy. Everybody loves him. His name's Jerry. I used to work out with him for years until I joined a different gym, and then COVID happens, But highest character guy ever. Everybody loves him. Retired cop and super solid. And he's the kind of guy who gives me faith.
Yeah, I love to hear that. I know there's more good than bad out there for sure, but I like your idea of more regular training. I think is important in any line of work, but in particular, you would think that these guys need it just for their own protection.
And it's probably should be very individualized, because being a cop in Chicago has got to be different parts of Chicago. Let's not just say Chicago. I mean, how about South Chicago versus, any other place, and then parts of New York, and how to interface with your particular community should be part of the regular training. Maybe it is. I don't know.
I don't know either, but I think more infusion with the community is probably always a good thing too. Is that they know the community, they know the people in the community, and they're respected within the community. Yeah. I remember as a kid in the neighborhood I grew up in, which was Cleveland Heights, that there was a high respect for the police officers at that time, and the police officers made themselves known to the community. I remember knowing several police officers as a little kid, and I think that's important too for kids to feel not threatened by police officers, but safe when they're there. I remember my parents, there was a park, Cumberland Park, across the street from where I lived in Cleveland Heights. My parents would always tell me, if there's any trouble, go directly to a police officer. And they told me exactly how to speak to them. That feels like that's lost these days.
Totally lost for sure. But that kind of makes me laugh when you brought that up. It made me think of your story about getting your bike stolen.
Oh God, that was horrible. I still have nightmares about that. The guy stole it right out of my hands. Talked me right out of my bicycle. And then I had to go tell my parents. And the guy stole it. Well, how did he steal it? Well, he just sort of took it. And what did you do? Nothing. I waited for him to come back with the bicycle. He never did.
Well, what were you, 7 or something?
Yeah, I was 7, and I was exactly 7. And my parents, they're so awesome. They felt terrible about that, and they didn't condemn me for the whole thing. Yeah,
well, that's good, because a kid losing his bike is devastating.
Oh, it was devastating. I'll never forget that feeling when I saw the guy kind of disappear into the horizon, and I knew he wasn't coming back. Oh my gosh, I cried so hard. Anyway, hey, I got something, just a little interesting thing here. It's a video I wanted to play. Bob Saget. We talked about Bob Saget, and hopefully I turned the sound on this, but I thought this was interesting.
And I know you love to also pepper in movies because you love the movies, and of course I love movies too.
Pepper in movies. I live for movies.
Yeah,
that's loud,
right? But as I said, I absolutely love movies as well.
You love 5 movies. You love Big Lebowski every day. You could watch Big Lebowski 4 times a day.
By the way, this is his wife that he's talking to. Let me just play that.
Okay, so you can turn that down by going to your right to the microphone. Yes, there you go. Just turn it down a little
look
bit.
Look at that. Oh, cool.
Now,
okay.
I just want to say, yeah, that should be fine. Just take the edge off. But that fireplace behind her looks exactly like my fireplace in my rental property.
Oh, that's pretty nice. I love that style, the stacked rocks like that. Well, let's listen to what he has to say next.
Sure.
The Godfather, Wayne's World, Godfather 2, Goodfellas, Casino, Scarface. But
so I don't have long to live. These are your favorites. I'm going to be found dead in bed.
Oh my
God!
Watch
out. So
I will almost guarantee you that that's doctored.
Well, it's out there on the internet, and I just have to say this: that whether that's doctored or not, I don't know. It didn't look like it to me.
It looked like it to me.
Did it?
Yeah.
I just want to say this: what people say out of their mouths is pretty important stuff. And I just would caution anybody about, especially this, just the way that we speak is so important. Speak positive. That's just an important thing. I had a guy that I knew very well in Los Angeles, and he ended up being murdered. And Anne-Marie and I went to his funeral. It was so sad. Young guy, very charismatic. And so many people came and told us that he would tell them all the time that he was going to be murdered in a very violent way for the whole time that they knew him. And I've heard that same kind of thing over and over. While you speak these negative things, positive things have the same effect. The way that we speak, we draw those things into our lives. Now, I don't know if that's what happened to Bob Saget. I don't know if that's real or not, but it's out there. But I've heard that kind of thing many times. I think that's interesting.
I know with the Saget thing, people are trying so hard to to drum up a conspiracy that he was murdered or this or that. I've seen that in the comments section and stuff.
I've also saw a story where the family is that me?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, sorry. There was just some noise in the background. Where the family actually has blocked certain information regarding Bob Saget's death that just happened this week from getting out into the public domain. I have to admit that it was odd what happened. He had, suffered some kind of head injury, went to sleep and thought nothing of it. But how do they know what he thought of right before he went to sleep? I think that's just speculation. Who knows? Stranger things have happened
in this story. I think it sounds silly.
Yeah,
it'll be what it'll be what it'll be. I don't think Bob Saget is the center of any kind of big political scheme.
I don't think it's political whatsoever. I just think it's interesting.
I know it's our latest Loch Ness monster kind of thing. And I mean, people really don't want this to die, a bad choice of words, but people don't want it to. They want to keep finding a different angle, keep it alive, keep the whole thing, the story going. And I really think
anybody that dies very quickly at that age, you got to look into it. I think that's
definitely think you should look into it. Sure, that's what has been going on. But you think that it's like so unlikely that he just actually hit his head, and exactly what happened is as it was reported is exactly what happened. You think that's too unlikely?
Oh, I'm not saying that it's one way or the other. My whole point in playing that was watch out what you say. We have to guard our mouths on what we say, whether that's real or not.
Yeah,
I have no idea, and my care about it meter isn't high on this whole thing. What I do care about is how we speak to one another, how we speak about ourselves, how we speak about our lives, how we speak about our success. That was really my whole point on this whole thing.
And I agree with you.
I've seen where people, I've seen people that talk about the luck that they have. I always get lucky when I do this or when I play cards, and then they play and they're always lucky. It's like, how could that happen? You know what I mean? It's like so crazy how that happens. There's one family I knew that they won the lotto, and they talked about how good they were at it. They actually won the lotto twice. This is back in the early 90s, right?
Yeah.
And so,
it's the power of positive thinking.
I think so too. That's really what the power of positive thinking is, just as powerful as the power of negative thinking. So choose the right door on this.
Right. And negative thinking may be more powerful because it's very seductive.
Yeah, it really is, isn't it?
It is, because we're geared toward seeking out what is dangerous, what is negative, because we can avoid it, so we can stay safe.
Well, and I think that's what the news has become. And that's why we're in such trouble with the media and the non-journalism that goes on today, is because we know that this bad news sells, good news doesn't. And so let's make it really bad, 24/7, really bad. And unfortunately, that has the potential of rubbing off on people. So they start speaking really bad stuff all the time. And then bad stuff happens.
Yeah. And to your point about the power of the spoken word, and about the positive stuff, is it keeps you in a place of appreciation. That's the whole story, the effectiveness behind The Secret. It's also the effectiveness behind your meaning you, Merle, your prayers, because when you pray, you do it in a way of appreciation. You have a very particular way that you pray, and I'm actually going to ask you for one now. I'm glad that we went in this direction. Lisa's Aunt Margie, and she is the most beloved person in our circle. Everybody that knows her, she's always so positive, always has been. And she got cancer and just underwent surgery for it. And Lisa just found out yesterday afternoon that the surgery, it went much longer than anticipated, that the cancer had spread more than anticipated. And so Lisa's very scared. And there's a lot of people that are very sad. And I wanted to ask you for a prayer for Aunt Margie, the most positive person. She's brought so much more to this world than she's ever taken.
Wow. Boy, my heart is with you and Lisa regarding this. And of course, I'll say a prayer regarding this. So, Father God, I just want to say thank you that this opportunity is here, that we can actually use our words to create change here. You said in your word that the power of life and death is in the tongue, and those who love it will live by the fruit thereof. And so we now have the ability to speak these things into existence. And I just lift up Margie to you right now. You know the situation, Lord. This isn't surprising you whatsoever. You said in your word that all things, that you can use all things for good here, even this, Lord, to bring about your good. And so, Lord, we just first off claim healing for Margie right now, that you would lend your healing touch to this. This is easy for you. Cancer is not a problem for you. You're the one that makes the sun rise every morning on time. This is an easy thing. You are a person that makes all things new again. And I just claim Margie to be new and renewed in her body, cancer-free. Miraculous testimony to your power is happening right now as we speak. This is earth moving for her and for us, so that we can see it and see your power and see your glory and come to your faith. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Merle. Thank you very much. And that would mean a lot to Lisa, but it means a lot to me because I said many times, I absolutely believe in the power of your prayers, and very much needed and very deserved by Margie.
Well, I hope she stays in that positive mode, because that's going to make all the difference in the world. And she will. Just say, but she doesn't even have to try. God's the one that's got this. He's the pilot on this, and he's saying, "Hey, we got this. We're going through a little bit of turbulence right now, but we're going to land on the ground safe and sound." Yeah. And that's it. That's what he does. I've seen it a million times in my own life.
I know. I appreciate that. We should be winding up. Just wanted to ask you, got anything interesting going on in your weekend?
I am looking forward to getting out there. I went on this wonderful walk yesterday in the neighborhood, and I really hadn't done that before. And I found this HOA trail through the golf course so that we could just walk through the golf course, which is beautiful. This golf course that I live right next to, it's awesome. And we were out there yesterday enjoying that. So I want to enjoy more of that. I'm hoping to get on my motorcycle for the first time this weekend. I haven't ridden it since I've been here, so I want to check some stuff out.
Yeah.
So hopefully I'll get a chance to be able to do that, but just looking forward to having some downtime with Anne-Marie. How about you?
I don't know. Lisa just keeps warning me that this is cleaning weekend.
I hate when that's so ominous.
Yeah. Well, it's even worse when you got a dog, because now I think I got to disappear with Charlie for some time. So.
I always come back at the end of those, kind of when Anne-Marie warns me like that. I'm always so sore on Monday morning from whatever it is that I had to do all weekend long.
She won't let me do much of anything because she has to do everything in her particular way. I just have to get out of the way and then hope that the mood isn't too bad after she's had, 6 hours or whatever of just being in her head doing all that stuff.
Anne-Marie is the same way. She's very particular about how things are done. It's sort of like our moving thing. We have all these boxes and everything, and I can help unpack the box, but as far as where that stuff is going to go and how it's arranged, that's all on her. Because if I do it, it's wrong. And then we got to redo everything. And I'll lift the boxes and move stuff. But other than that, I'm useless.
Hey, I wanted to tell you about, just before we go, that this week, right now, Jordan Peterson on his podcast channel, he has a podcast that with him and his wife. Never met his wife before on the podcast, and boy, does she sound like a very, very sweet person who barely made it through cancer over the last couple of years, and he's had his own ungodly amount of medical problems. But he has a personality test somewhere online. I'm sure if you Google Jordan Peterson personality test, you could find it. Sounds like it doesn't cost too much to take, but it's extremely thorough. And he put it together with his own team of academics. And he and his wife took it, and his daughter, who has her own podcast. She basically runs the Jordan Peterson podcast,
right?
Michaela.
Yeah.
She interviews Jordan and his wife, and they divulge the results of the personality test. And it is so interesting and so insightful for us people that are in relationships. And my God, there's a direct parallel between Jordan and his wife, their personalities and their how they interact, to me and Lisa. I am so like Jordan, and she is so like his wife, Tammy. And I just kept telling her, you better listen to that podcast. And she's telling me, did you read that book that I sent you, Merle, about what is it? The second half, being happy the second half of your life.
Yeah. I like the concept of that book.
I do too. And I've seen it since she brought it to our attention. I've seen it repeatedly recommended other places. So it must be a big bestseller right now, which is great. But I'm always like neck deep in everything that I'm listening to. And
right.
But it'd be a good audio book. I'm sure she's going to get it, and then she'll give it to me, and I'm sure I'll talk about it. But I wanted to just say, if you want to, I think you should listen to that Jordan Peterson podcast. I think you'd find it.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Cool. And I think, and I hope that Lisa and I will take that personality test, because we've gotten to know each other so slowly over our 13 years together, and work things out so slowly over those 13 years, but have had some real success. But our personality and it's because our personalities are so different. And it's also why it's lasted 13 years though, as well.
I understand exactly what you're saying. Anne Marie and I have very different personalities as well. There's some similarities, but there's a lot of differences there. And I don't think it would work if her personality were just like mine. We'd be in a lot of trouble, actually, if her personality was just like mine. So thank God she's sort of I'm the big picture guy, and she's the detailed person, and that works out pretty good for both of us.
That's really good. That's a really good way to put it too. Yeah, I was thinking, I'm kind of that way too. And Lisa certainly is a real detail-oriented person, but she does have a really uncanny way of seeing the big picture as well. So
one of the things that is different between Anne Marie and I is that, I typically try not to worry about stuff. Like if worry comes into me, I'm allergic to that. I've tried to don't worry about this,
Lisa worries about everything.
Yeah, Anne Marie's like that too. And so we're constantly like having sort of the yin and the yang regarding that. I remember when growing up, I think the thing that conditioned me to not worry was my dad would be like, well, are you worried about this going on or that going on? And then, no. Well, you better worry about that. I would resist that, No, I wouldn't say anything to him. I would just make up my mind. I'm just not going to worry about that. And it all works out for me that way. And I'm a lot happier not worrying about stuff.
Yeah, no, I'm in agreement with you. And, when things get to a point where it affects your sleep, and that's a problem that Lisa really battles, that's when it's a spiral. It's horrible.
Yeah.
So I'm with you. Yeah. I'm with you.
I like do things to not worry about things, because what I found out is that usually when I'm worried about something, and it works it out by itself, or somehow something happens, and then whatever it was I was worried about, I'm like, I just wasted all that energy worrying about that thing, and I never even really had to worry about it. It's sort of like that book report that you had to do in school, and you're like, oh my God, I'm gonna have to do this, and I'm not prepared, and then you never get called on that day, and the whole time you had no sleep, you stressed, whatever. You know what I'm talking about. It's crazy.
But there's another part of it too, where it gets you into overwhelm, and then it's paralysis by analysis.
Yeah, your performance is impacted.
And I've done that to myself many times, and have recognized in hindsight, if I could have just gotten that out of the way, I could have just rolled right through this thing. Because once I finally did whatever that was, it wasn't as bad. I made it 100 times worse.
Yes. Yep. There it is. Right there. I'm right there with you. Good place to end the show.
Yeah. I hate to, but man, I got lots to do. So
yeah, me too.
All right, cool. All right, buddy. Great show, man. Really,
as usual. Yep. Yeah. Me too, man.
Have a great weekend, dude. Love you.
You too. Love you too. Bye now.